Hi, my name is Cassandra Dykes, and I'm going to explain a little special education law before the 1970s and from the 1970s to today. Before the 1970s, some states had laws that directly excluded special needs and disabled children from attending school at all. In 1967, state institutions were homes for over 200,000 people with disabilities. They were housed in a restrictive setting where they were just clothed and fed, not taught whatsoever. In 1959 and 1958, the Training Professionals Personnel Act and the Caption Films Act were passed, which enabled people to be educated in how to teach students with special needs and disabilities. The Caption Films Act allowed for videos that teachers could use to help educate their students. PL Public Law 88-146 combined these acts together and expanded training programs for all disabilities. In 1965, Elementary and Secondary Education Act and State Schools Act gave states grants, money, to help educate students with disabilities, enabling students to begin to be educated in an environment like that of their typically developing peers. This is the start of special needs students being integrated into the classroom. The Handicapped Children's Early Education Act of 1968 and the Economic Opportunities Amendment of 1972 authorized support for early childhood programs to increase enrollment of students with special needs and disabilities, allowing students with these needs to begin to learn as early as possible. From 1970 on, this is where students really start to be able to learn together instead of segregated in special ed classrooms or not in school at all. In 1975, Congress passes the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, Public Law 94-142, and high school graduation rates increase with special ed students and students with disabilities from 1984 to 1997 by 14%. The Education for All Handicapped Children Act that was passed in 1975 guarantees a free and appropriate public education to each child with a disability or special needs, meaning they now are entitled to an education as close as possible to that of their typically developing peers. They are no longer being ostracized or handled differently because they have different needs. They are now entitled to the same education as close as possible to that of everyone else. The Early Childhood or the Education for All Handicapped Children Act only allowed services for students from 3 years to 21 years. In 1986, that was amended to include services from birth. From the moment a student is born, a child is born and diagnosed to have a special need or disability, they are allowed to receive services. This amendment changed that. In 1990, Public Law 101-476, Education for All Handicapped Children, changes to Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the IDEA Act that we are familiar with today and that we abide by today. In 1997, Public Law 105-17 supports transitional services from childhood to adulthood. Now we are leaving high school and becoming adults. We still need help. Students with IEPs now have plans for transition within their IEPs. Each person who is responsible for each part of this transitional plan from high school to adulthood must be stated in the IEP. This plan now starts at age 14. So 4 years before high school is over, students are starting to be prepared for life after high school, when the special needs team is no longer there. The IEP team is no longer there. They've provided you the most comprehensive education to that of your peer, and now you have to take that and put it to work. But they're not just going to throw you out there. This law in 1997, this amendment to IDEA in 1997, now allows for students to be prepared for the real world. There are a couple court cases that I found. Terrence D. and Wanda D. versus the School District of Philadelphia in 2008, where the school district failed to notify the guardian of their rights and failed to provide proper evaluations for the student. And also Stephen James versus Newport News Public Schools in 2000, where the parents claimed they were never notified of the IEP, but the IEP process went on as normal, and the IEP was signed without the parents' consent, where in both cases the parents were reimbursed for what they had spent to help their child, where the school district was responsible for providing them the information.